Congressman, good morning. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
Hey, Tony. How are you doing, Dr. Bain?
Well, I'm doing just fine, and it's good for you to call me Tony. That makes me happy. So no worries. No worries about that. I wanted to have you on this morning to talk a little bit about you. You are heavily engaged in questions about the United States energy independence and actually energy dependence on other countries and how that dependence is actually affecting our national security and military readiness. And you made a statement the other day as you were leading a subcommittee to that effect. I want you to describe your role in all of this for our listeners, and then talk about what your concerns are and what the concerns of your committee are about our dependence on getting vital elements from countries that are not friendly to the United States, things that we have to have for our military to function and for our private industry to function. That you're trying to put a light on that and get us to change that policy so that domestic production is what we're relying on.
Yes, sir. Well, first off, I am chair of the Energy, Climate, and Grid Security Subcommittee on the Energy and Commerce Committee, one of the largest committees in the United States House of Representatives. And so in this role as chairman of the subcommittee, I'm focused on returning American energy dominance. And one of the areas that we're focused on is where the nation gets its enriched uranium. Now, if you think about this historically and holistically, the Department of Energy was set up in the 1970s to end our dependence on foreign sources of energy so that we as America, as a nation, could be energy independent. And here we are today where at least 20 to 25% of our enriched uranium that is used in our nuclear reactors to produce baseload energy comes from Russia. And because we've sourced this enriched uranium from other places around the globe, we don't have a domestic supply capability to meet all of our energy needs. And so we're really pushing hard to send the right signals to industry. It's a mature market to make sure that we start focusing on domestic sourcing of enriched uranium and stop buying it from Russia. And so we had a bill in the committee the other day that would actually put a sunset date or a drop dead date on Russian uranium coming to the United States of 2027. We'll give the DOE a little bit of leniency there with waivers if the technology or the market isn't there, the domestic sourcing isn't there yet. But it's got to get there because we're not going to buy enriched uranium from Russia anymore. So working on that and a continued push, Tony, to keep from buying, anything that we can produce here, whether it's the critical minerals that make all of our devices work, the rare earths, the lithium, the nickel, the copper, everything that makes our lives and our standard of living so much better, we have here in this country, and we should source it here so that we're not relying on Chinese companies that mine it in an environmentally insensitive way in Africa using slave labor, process it in China, and then make the devices or send the solar panels or the wind turbines or whatever it is back to the United States. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't be relying on China or anyone else when we have the ability to do it here.
Well, and of course, one of the key reasons for that is we don't know when China might decide to stop selling us those key minerals, particularly if they were to decide to make a move against Taiwan. If the United States and China were to become militarily engaged, then obviously any advantage that we have that China would be providing would be immediately cut off at that point. We also get a lot of our minerals, I understand, from the things that we need for computers, chips that run our cars, that run just about everything. We get a lot of that from Taiwan. So the same thing, if you've got China and Taiwan in a military engagement, the United States gets involved, then we're going to be in a bad way when it comes to taking care of our own needs.
Absolutely, and the same thing with Russia. Russia would cut off the enriched uranium that we need in our reactors if we had a conflict with China just because of the closeness of those two communist countries. And so it just points to the need for domestic sourcing of critical minerals and other things here that we have. We shouldn't be relying on another country. We don't have to be if we would just have the right policies for energy production, whether that's fossil fuels or whether that's critical minerals or whether that's enriched uranium to burn in our reactors. And just make sure if there was any silver lining in the COVID pandemic, It was an awareness that we needed to do more here onshore in America. We needed to return a lot of industry here so that we weren't reliant all across the board on things that we need to make our lives better, to fight a pandemic, to produce energy, and strengthen America. And the last thing I'll say on energy is that there is no national security without energy security. And so it comes down to energy security. We can't rely on renewables to power our military. We need to continue using what works, and that comes with enriched uranium for our vessels that are powered by nuclear power, and that comes with the fuels that we need in our tanks and our trucks and things that move our men and women around to fight for this country and defend our freedom.
Yeah, and let me talk about another bill, too, that your committee took up. It's H.R. 1640, which is the Save Our Gas Stoves Act. Now, what's interesting is we know that the Biden administration lied to the American people when it said, "Oh, there's nothing to see here." Months ago, when it began, different news agencies began to report on the fact that it appeared that the Biden administration was getting ready to ban gas stoves. And then, immediately there was pushback and saying that was an overreaction. Well, we now know that was a lie, that the Biden administration is coming after gas stoves. So this would actually prevent them from passing regulations without them going through Congress that would make it impossible for people to have their gas stoves. It would become too expensive either to get them fixed or whatever they needed to have done to them. So you're also moving to try to protect Americans' freedom in the marketplace to be able to decide what kind of energy they're going to use in their home.
Absolutely. I'm a co-sponsor of Debbie Lesko's bill to save our gas stoves. The federal government shouldn't get down into these details about what consumer choices are available. Gas stoves are more efficient. They actually save consumers money over the life of the unit. And but it's this whole electrification mindset that the administration has. And they continue lying about it to the American people, as you pointed out. This was a proposed rule by the Biden administration. We saw other states, blue states primarily, moving in this direction as well. And no, the rule hadn't passed the agency yet, but it was a proposed rule. And so we have a duty to push back in the United States Congress against any proposed rule that we disagree with, and something as egregious as this. It's gas stoves today, it's heat packs tomorrow, it's your Rinnai tankless hot water heater, then it's some other appliance that uses natural gas, simply because it's not about efficiency, it's not about consumer savings, it's simply because the Democrats do not like the fossil fuel natural gas.
Exactly. And this is something, we have problems with our power grid here in the United States already. Some states more than others. We see, for example, in California, they have rolling blackouts in other places out west, and yet California wants to transition over to electric cars, only the sale of electric cars by 2035. Well, how in the world can they provide the electricity necessary when everybody plugs their car in, when they don't have an energy grid that's sufficient to take care of their needs today? This is just another example of how we need a comprehensive energy policy going forward that supplies the energy that the United States needs in so many different ways, that we do that domestically where we don't depend on foreign sources.
I mean, you're exactly right. And look, I like renewables. I've said it many, many times. I like truly all of the above energy. I think renewables are groovy, but we also see what happens in California when they can't produce enough in renewable energy, and then they take other baseload power generation out of the mix, whether that's a gas-fired power plant or a coal-fired power plant or nuclear power. They take it down because they have some utopian view that wind and solar is going to provide every bit of it, and it won't. And so to meet some of their renewable goals, and knowing they can't provide it all themselves, now the talk is about these electric transmission corridors. So to bring power to California from another state. And ironically, they're working with an Iowa congresswoman. Iowa produces a lot of wind power, more than they consume, so they do have exportable energy. Well, they want to run it all the way to California, and they want to run transmission lines from Iowa to California. So California can buy Iowa renewable energy, say they're meeting their climate targets, but they're not producing the energy. They're just not using some other source, but they'll use Iowa wind generated. It just makes no sense, especially when, and I'm not going to get down in the weeds, when you look at who pays for that transmission line across multiple states. It's just ludicrous. And so their grid infrastructure in California can't support what they desire, and the nation's grid infrastructure can't support what the Biden administration is pushing on electrification of our transportation system, because it takes a heck of a lot of power, and then you've got to run a lot of copper line, and they don't want us to mine copper, so where's that going to come from? And then just what the charging stations themselves use, the cost, it's just not tenable. And, so they have no common sense and pragmatism when it comes to this because of this utopian mindset that they've got. We know what works. We know that fossil fuels, natural gas has gotten our lower carbon emissions in this country, helped us reach where we are today. We know we need to bring more nuclear power online. Small modular reactors, advanced reactors will help actually meet our baseload generation and lower our carbon emissions because it's almost carbon free. We know which way to go in this country, but the Democrats are focusing on your stove.
Let's change topics here for just a second and talk about another national security threat that's been in the news a lot lately, and that's the woke policies that are being put in place by the upper echelons of the United States military. We have the greatest military in the world still. I think I still believe that. I believe the men and women who serve in the military are some of the best in the world. But our leaders are beginning to push the lower echelons in the military toward woke policies that have that can undermine our military readiness. Can you talk a little bit about that and what kind of a threat that you think that might be?
Well, these policies go back to the Obama administration when he replaced generals and had generals retire to bring more like-minded leadership into the Pentagon and start pushing these, what we now call woke policies. Back then we called it social engineering of our Department of Defense. And, lowering the readiness standards, the testing for men and women at frontline units to make it more doable for the women to actually pass the test and be part of that. And now, and even back then, we saw more of the transgenderism and our tax dollars paying for transgender surgery and therapy within the Department of Defense for these people who just want to transition and become a different gender, but we paid for it. And so we've continued to try to push back against what American tax dollars go for. They ought to go for bullets and planes and tanks and other things to defend our country and not pay for gender transition surgery and therapy. So those things have been going on for quite a long time, and it just seems like it's ramped up a good bit under the Biden administration. But if you really look at it, a lot of the Biden administration people in the White House and in other agencies are old Obama holdouts. This is just Obama 2.0 with Valerie Jarrett and Susan Rice and them running the show. So it's just scary what we see. I want a military that focuses on, can I hit the target downrange?
Right.
Regardless of what weapon system I'm shooting, can I hit the target downrange? Can I defend America? Do I know how to fight? And am I willing to stand in that gap and defend the Constitution of the United States? And that's what's so important.
Well, and there's another thing that's going on in the military right now that is concerning, and that's the Biden administration push to have all military vehicles electrified within, about the next 15 years or so. And there's a debate about that. There are actually people who are saying that electric vehicles in the military would improve our military readiness. I just don't understand that when you understand that our current technology of batteries that power vehicles are susceptible to cold. They lose 40% of their effectiveness in cold weather. Fighting conditions, I mean, we don't always get to go to war in the best of conditions, and it seems like that the technology for electric vehicles is nowhere near the level that we would want to turn all of our military vehicles into electric vehicles. Do you agree?
I agree with you 100%. I mean, an M1A1 Sherman tank now, not Sherman tank, but M1A1 tank, already weighs a bunch. But you put batteries in, it's going to weigh a heck of a lot more.
Right.
And what are we going to do? Stop fighting when we start losing the juice on the tank? You can't bring a can of electricity out there to recharge the fighting vehicles. You can bring a a barrel of diesel fuel to put in that tank or that truck to get where we're going. Look, we defeated the Germans in the Battle of the Bulge because we ran them out of fuel.
Right.
And, America doesn't need to be in that situation where we're wondering where the next charging station is so we can continue the battle, or we're worried about, well, when the sun goes down, we're going to have to stop this fight and we'll pick it back up in the morning. This is ridiculous, and everybody knows it's ridiculous except for these woke people in the Biden administration.